So after you restate and answer the question, you give your because answer. You give your first E1, which is a piece of evidence. The next thing you're going to do is an E2. E2 stands for explain. So after you cite a piece of evidence, you have to explain how your evidence supports your answer. So again, we are looking at that same question. Describe the actions the wolf took to fool Little Red Riding Hood. We gave a piece of evidence in that first video about how the wolf put on the granny's sleeping gown, put on some of her perfume. So now we have to explain that answer. So here's what we have. This evidence shows. That is a great way to start your sentences whenever you are writing an E2, whenever you're writing an explanation. This evidence shows that the wolf attempted to change his physical appearance, so he tried to change the way he looks, in order to trick Little Red. He thought by wearing the grandmother's clothes and perfume, he could convince Little Red that her grandmother was alive and well. One thing I want to point out here, two things actually. First, this is 2 sentences long, and I'll repeat this again here in just a second, but your E2s, when you explain your evidence, those need to be at least 2 sentences. And the other thing I want to point out here is I'm not just repeating what my quote said. I am thinking about the quote and I am explaining in my own words how it supports my answer. So why do we need to explain our evidence? First, it shows that we understand how the text supports our answer, so it shows our understanding. And then also, as I said, it does need to be 2 sentences long. And remember, it shouldn't just restate your answer. It's really taking your answer a step further and showing that you fully understand the concepts that you're talking about. We are not done there. After your first E1 and your first E2, in order to have a completely written ABEE extended response question, you need to add a second E1 and a second E2. So what that means is we're going to go back to the text and we are going to find a second piece of evidence that supports our answer, and then we are going to explain that second piece of evidence. So that might look something like this. The text also states, notice I am pulling this straight from the text. I have quotation marks. It says, "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" She asked, "Oh, I just have a touch of a cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove the point. And then I have my closing quotation marks. So again, I went back to the text and I found a second piece of evidence that supports my answer. And now I have to have another E2 where I explain. This proves the wolf not only changed his appearance to trick Red Riding Hood, but also his voice. All of this was done in an attempt to trick Red. So again, remember, your E2 should be at least 2 sentences. We are not just repeating the quote or repeating our answer. We're taking it a step further and we're explaining our evidence. Last but not least, the very last part of an ABEE extended response question is a concluding sentence. So this is going to be 1 sentence at the very end of the paragraph that wraps up your thoughts and brings everything to a close. Again, same question. Describe the actions the wolf took to fool Red Riding Hood. This would be a great example of a concluding sentence. Luckily, Little Red wasn't fooled by the wolf's deceitful actions. It's just 1 sentence that wraps up the entire paragraph. So, if we put it all together, if I give you an extended response question and I ask you to use the ABEE writing strategy to answer it, it might look something like this. First, I restate and I answer. The wolf fooled Little Red Riding Hood by pretending to be Red's grandmother. Next, I give my because, which is what we have here in the blue. He did this because he wanted Red to feel comfortable when she visited so he could eat her just like he ate her grandmother. Notice I did not include any I think, I feel, I believe. Now I'm going to give my first E1, which is a piece of evidence from the text. According to the text, the wolf then poked through Granny's wardrobe to find a nightgown that he liked. He also added a frilly sleeping cap and for good measure dabbed some of Granny's perfume behind his pointy ears. There's my E1, my evidence from the text. I have my quotation marks for the beginning and the end. Now my E2 is where I'm going to explain my evidence using at least 2 sentences. This evidence shows that the wolf attempted to change his physical appearance in order to trick Little Red. He thought that by wearing the grandmother's clothes and perfume, he could convince Little Red that her grandmother was alive and well. Now I have to have my second E1, so my second piece of evidence. The text also states, "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" she asked. "Oh, I just have a touch of a cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove the point. Now my second E2, where I explain. This proves that the wolf not only changed his appearance to trick Red Riding Hood, but also his voice. All of this was done in an attempt to trick Red. And then last but not least, the concluding sentence. Luckily, Little Red wasn't fooled by the wolf's deceitful actions. So, my friends, if I ask you to use the ABEE writing strategy, if you have an extended response question, this is along the lines of what I'm looking for. You're going to restate an answer, give me a because, evidence, explain, a second piece of evidence and explain, and then a concluding sentence.